speaking of journeys and how they got here, I want to talk about this Bucks team as a whole, because out of their top 10 rotation players, 5 were low-level signings. 3 have arrived via trade. Drew Holiday back in November, PJ Tucker, and Chris Middleton back in 2013. Then you have Giannis and Dante. They're drafted by the organization. Brooke Lopez, Bobby Portis, my guy, who I'm gonna give him a shout out later. I've been holding off on it, but it's coming. Pat Connaughton, Brett, but just this team is so different from the other teams across this league. There was an interview Giannis did where he kind of talks about how it's not a super team and they did this the hard way, and et cetera, et cetera. And Quigley, I'll go to you with this one. What does this mean for other teams across the league, and the fact that this team really wasn't, a super team? You do have Giannis, you have Drew Holiday, you have Chris Middleton, but that they didn't get there the way that we've seen other teams do it. And we just haven't seen it. We haven't seen it in a while. 5 of the previous 6 NBA Final MVPs, LeBron James, Kawhi, KD twice, Andre Iguodala, they won the award with the team that didn't draft them. LeBron won with the Cavs in 2016, but that was after Miami. He came back. It was a big decision, and then another big decision. And then you take Giannis, who has stuck with his team. He had the option to leave going into this season. He signs the Supermax extension. What does this mean going forward for other teams in the league? What does this mean for the whole stigma and the stereotype that the NBA has just turned into this big super team, players chasing rings, crazy circus?
Well, I do think that the Bucks did something really special in Milwaukee with how they've just grown so much talent within their organization, and now they're at the point where they have a superstar. He stays, re-signs last offseason, says he wants to win a championship in Milwaukee, and he won't leave until he does. And then you heard him after the game last night saying, "Let's win another." Everybody was saying it. Everybody who was going up to the mic to talk after the win, they're all saying, "Hey, I'm so glad that I'm here." For the people that just arrived here in Drew Holiday, and for the people who have been here, like Chris Middleton, even though he wasn't drafted by the organization, he's been there as long as Giannis has, and they all want to run it back. So it's definitely a lesson to the teams of the Nets caliber or the Lakers who are going out there and just building for now, not necessarily trying to win from within. And we've seen how those teams sometimes fall short. I mean, obviously the Nets got crippled with injuries at a terrible time, but throughout the season, they were very rarely all 3 of them on the court. So injuries happen, and they cause a big tear to your team if you have 3 players that can carry you and the rest of your team doesn't show up. With the Bucks, they had a bunch of players that, even when they didn't show up, like Drew Holiday, who didn't show up offensively at all, well, he's still putting up about 6 assists, per game during the series. I think I'm maybe switching 6 boards, 9 assists per game. And, he's also getting 3 steals in that final game there. He's providing in all of the ways that, are not necessarily scoring, even when he's off. So if you have role players, or not role players, but, secondary players that can play a role, even when they're not shining to their full ability, you don't necessarily have that on these teams where it's, 3 main guys, they're all scorers, and defense is kind of thrown out the wayside because you can just destroy a team with your offense. It's a lesson to all those teams that, hey, sometimes a deeper team, a team that prioritizes defense a little bit more than just overpowering the other team's defense, it can win championships. It did it right now. And, that could be the mold going forward in case these super teams continue to fall flat as they have in the past 2 years.
Well, I wanted to kind of jump off of your point, Quiggs, about the super team thing, because it's with the Nets, they severely, I thought, miscalculated how they were going to build their team. And we knew that the Harden trade was going to happen and he wanted to go to the Nets at some point. That's a given. I don't think we're going to disagree that he wanted out of Houston. There's no question about it. And I thought you can say a lot about the Harden trade, between the Pacers choosing choosing to trade what they did, and then the Rockets taking Oladipo instead of LeVert, and all the 500 moving parts they had in that trade. The Brooklyn Nets traded for essentially an expiring contract this upcoming season for Harden because he has a player option after. All three of them do. And that's the risk you run when you sign these superstar players to these big deals, because all of a sudden, I'm going to use the Knicks example. When they traded for Carmelo and they gave away like half of Manhattan to do it, they immediately started giving away picks and 3-team trades for Tyson Chandler. They had Amari Stoudemire already. They were trying to sign who they could. And that's what the Nets have kind of fallen into, that trap of scrambling for stuff. Now, don't be Portland, however, and have Damian Lillard and McCollum and act like a 40-win team and not trade your first-round picks when you could have had Jimmy Butler. But that's a discussion for another day. The point is, you have to understand how long you're going to have these players for. And for the Nets, I feel like it's not going to be that much longer. Maybe 2 years. If James Harden's body doesn't I wouldn't say betray him, but if the playoffs don't betray him like they have in the past, if Kyrie's body continues to betray him, as well as Durant's, that's definitely going to be a problem. They're tied up in quite a bit of money. I don't know if they're going to keep Dinwiddie. That's another bench piece gone. So teams like that, and I know that I'm kind of killing the Nets right now, but that's the example I think of immediately off the top of my head. But
I mean, you're right. Like the super teams fall apart immediately. And
they fall so quick.
Every single one. The Heat stayed around for 4 years. The Warriors, obviously, they had KD for 3 years, but now they're completely decimated. And
I wouldn't say that, Quiggs. I wouldn't say that. Okay, they're going to be back.
When Klay Thompson comes back, it's a different story if he can play to the full ability that he has in the past. But, they're still not necessarily championship contenders, although they're somehow the fourth most likely out of Vegas to, or what is it, like fourth longest, shortest odds?
In the West, I think, yeah.
Well, they're like minus 1,000 compared to like three. There's like 3 teams above them. One of them was the Bucks. So I don't think it was just the West, but it's insane. I mean, they didn't make the playoffs this year, and we don't know if Klay Thompson's going to be whatever. This is for another day. The point is, super teams don't last, and I don't think they're going to continue to last. That's not going to change.